Hello. I'm always I'm always trying new things, and so sometimes I forget what I've tried and what I did and what I didn't do, and I thought I had a countdown, but apparently I don't. Uh, I must have disabled that feature without realizing it. There's so many things that you can enable on your computer, or you can disable, that it gets very confusing. Anyway, what I'm going to talk about today is I realize I've done a lot of stuff, and I've been involved in a lot of stuff that I don't think about much. Sometimes it'll come to me in the middle of the night. But I was remembering that when I lived, I've told you I lived in New York for 10 years back in the 60s when I was a young man. And I was working at the Brill Building, which was right across the street from the Winter Garden Theater in Manhattan. And the Brill Building, it was what was left of what they called Tin Pan Alley, where a lot of famous composers and have written music through the years, and it was very famous in its day. And it, of course, by the 1960s when I worked there, it was still all musical people, and it was like a 12-story building. And the company that I worked for, we were on the top floor. They had the penthouse, what they call the penthouse floor, which was just offices. It wasn't, it wasn't a penthouse like in the movies. It was just on the top floor of the building, and there was other below us. Burt Bacharach had an office. I would see him in the elevator sometime. Connie Francis Music's office was there. Believe it or not, her father was there all the time. He was always promoting Connie to anybody that would listen. He was so proud of her. I never saw her, but I always saw her father talk to him a lot of times. And on the ground floor was Jack Dempsey Restaurant. Jack Dempsey was a famous fighter, and he was still alive, and he was there. He was there all the time, and he said hello to you if you worked in the building. He got to know your faces and stuff. So anyway, it was a happening place. A lot of famous people were there. When Liza Minnelli was going with Peter Allen and his brother had an office there because they wrote music, and she would come meet him in the lobby, and at lunchtime, and they would go out, and I saw her a couple of times, and waiting for him to come down in the elevator. So it was a very interesting place. Anyway, in 1965, and I had to look this up because I didn't remember, it was in November of 1965, all the lights in New York City went out. There was a blackout, and we were still at work. It happened at 5, according to what I just looked up, at 5:16, which meant we were getting ready to go home from work. It was the end of the day, and being on the 12th floor, of course, we couldn't use the elevator. I mean, everything was pitch black, and we had off of the executive office, there was like a terrace, and you could walk out, and we walked out, and you could see the whole city was just black. I mean, it was just a very eerie feeling to witness a city like New York with no lights on, because it was dark out. It was already dark out. Because it was November. It was in the fall, in the winter time, so it was already dark. And I remember we were confused, and people didn't know people were trying to figure out what was going on. And of course, back then we didn't have cell phones. It was just landline phones. And I think in one of the offices they had a radio, and somebody found a radio station, and they found out that it wasn't just us; it was the whole eastern seaboard, all the way up to Canada. It was Canada, Connecticut, Massachusetts, New Haven, New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, Vermont, and it affected over 30 million people in 8 U.S. states and Canada, Ontario, and Quebec. I'm reading this. I had to look it up because I wouldn't remember all that. But I remember it was frightening because people were speculating. They said, well, war's been declared and somebody has attacked us. I mean, that was you didn't know what to think. And the other theory was that aliens had come from outer space and we were being invaded by aliens. And so, I don't know, there's all kinds of crazy stuff. So one of the bosses had a bar in his office, and they opened up the bar, and we were all having drinks, and we were, if we wanted some, they gave us a drink. So then a bunch of us decided that we weren't going to stay. A couple of the gals that lived, like I think in Queens or something, where they would have to take the subway to get home, they couldn't because there's no electricity. We didn't know when it was going to come back on. So they decided they were going to stay over at the office and just sleep on the desk. Somehow they were going to make a bed and do that. And a couple of the guys, I lived up on the west side, and I could walk home, although it was quite a walk if I had to, because you couldn't get on a bus. People were falling off the buses. But anyway, we decided to leave, and so we formed like a human chain to walk down the steps. And I remember we sang as we were walking down the steps down to the first floor. And Jack Dempsey's had opened his restaurant to people in the building. He had by candlelight, they were serving food, whatever they could serve that didn't, without refrigeration, like I guess sandwiches or something. They weren't open to the public, just people that worked in the building, if we wanted to eat. But a couple of the guys that lived in Queens or the Bronx or wherever, they couldn't get home. They came to my apartment, and one slept on the couch and one slept on the floor, and when we got home, I think my phone was working, and I called my parents in Texas to see if they knew what was going on, and they were telling me what was happening where I lived because it was on national television. They said, they didn't know when it was going to be fixed, but it was some kind of an electric transformer thing, and it was in Canada that affected all of the eastern seaboard. So I got that information from my parents over the phone, who was watching it on national television in Texas. And I don't remember when the lights came back on, but probably sometime in the middle of the night. And the next morning we were, everybody was pretty jovial. One of the guys, I remember, he smoked. I don't think I was smoking at that time. And he tried to buy a pack of cigarettes, and they were selling them on the street like $10 a pack or something. And that was back in '65 when cigarettes were cheap. So people were definitely taking advantage of the situation. But it was an experience I lived through. I mean, nothing happened to me or anything. It was just that I got to see New York City in a blackout because I was part of it. So, um, that's just another one of my New York stories that I thought I would share with you, okay? Talk to you later. Bye.